For decades, Garth Brooks was the golden boy of country music. The cowboy hat, the $1 million smile, the emotional ballads that could bring a stadium of grown men to tears. He had it all. To fans, he was the humble superstar, the guy who'd rather thank his mama than throw a punch. But behind that all-American grin was a storm brewing quietly. Because not everyone in Nashville bought the Garth Brooks fairy tale. Whispers followed him from backstage lounges to record label boardrooms. Artists accused him of being too polished, too corporate, too perfect. And while Garth never named names, his silence said plenty. Over the years, 5 names kept coming up. 5 singers who clashed with him so hard, it left a scar across the country music world. Some were legends, some were loudmouths, some simply refused to play the Garth game. And now we're revealing all 5. Garth Brooks built his career on being the guy everyone could love. He wasn't just a chart-topping megastar, he was the relatable Oklahoma kid who never forgot where he came from. While other artists were chasing fame with bar fights and big egos, Garth was showing up to hospitals, hugging fans in parking lots, and crying during interviews. He branded himself as the emotional cowboy who'd rather write a song about his mama than trash-talk another artist. And for the most part, it worked. The media loved him, the fans worshipped him, and the country music industry, well, that's where things get complicated. See, Garth didn't just play by the rules, he rewrote them. He brought pyro to his shows, rock energy to his albums, and pop crossover appeal that ruffled more than a few cowboy feathers. To the old school crowd, Garth wasn't saving country music, he was packaging it for the suburbs, and they didn't like it. Some called him a sellout, others called him fake, and a few, well, they didn't call him anything at all. They just turned cold. Because under that friendly, polished surface, Garth wasn't afraid to make enemies. He just did it with a smile. But the first crack in the Mr. Nice Guy image came when a fellow country star stepped up and called him out by name. And what followed was the beginning of a feud that would divide fans and stir up the kind of drama Nashville loves to pretend doesn't exist. And that feud, it started with a man named Travis Tritt. Travis Tritt wasn't the kind of guy to bite his tongue, and when it came to Garth Brooks, he didn't hold back. While Garth was packing arenas with fireballs and headset mics, Travis was rolling his eyes from the sidelines. He didn't like the flash, didn't like the theatrics, and most of all, didn't like what Garth was doing to country music. Back in the early 90s, Travis took a public jab at Garth, criticizing his use of pre-recorded tracks and flashy performances. He said country music was about heart and grit, not smoke machines and choreographed stage dives. If you've got to lip sync, Tritt once said in an interview, you shouldn't be performing. It was a not-so-subtle dig aimed squarely at Garth, whose high-energy shows had begun borrowing from the pop and rock playbook. Fans were divided. Some sided with Travis, calling Garth a glorified pop act in a cowboy hat. Others saw Tritt as bitter jealous of Garth's explosive rise and massive commercial success. But behind the scenes, things were even tenser than they looked. Music insiders whispered about backstage snubs, cold shoulders at award shows, and studio sessions where Tritt allegedly warned producers, "Don't make me sound like Garth." And while Garth never clapped back publicly, true to his take the high road persona, he also never forgot. The two never collaborated, never shared a stage, and seemed to actively avoid each other whenever they were booked on the same lineup. Years later, Travis tried to soften the blow, saying his comments were misunderstood. But by then the damage was done. Garth wasn't just aware of the tension, he remembered it, and he made sure the distance stayed permanent. But if you thought Travis was bold, wait until you hear what the next country legend had to say. Because unlike Tritt, he didn't throw shade in interviews. He fired shots from the stage. Waylon Jennings didn't believe in filters. He didn't believe in politics or PR statements or smiling for the cameras if you didn't mean it. And he sure as hell didn't believe in Garth Brooks. To Waylon, country music was about rebellion, pain, and truth, not laser lights and choreographed curtain drops. So when Garth burst onto the scene with massive crossover appeal and a stage show that looked more like a rock concert than a honky-tonk performance, Waylon wasn't impressed. He was downright disgusted. Jennings, who helped pioneer the outlaw country movement alongside legends like Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash, saw Garth as the face of everything wrong with modern country. "That ain't country," Waylon once said flat out when asked about Garth. He referred to Brooks as a marketing machine rather than a real artist. The message was clear. In Waylon's world, Garth didn't belong. Garth, always the diplomat, never fired back publicly. But his actions spoke volumes. He rarely acknowledged Jennings in interviews, even when discussing country legends. And when Waylon was asked to join tribute shows that included Garth, he often declined or left before Garth hit the stage. Behind the scenes, it was worse. Rumors swirled that Jennings had once told a promoter, "If Garth's on the bill, I'm not." And even after Waylon's passing, Garth remained silent. No public tribute, no heartfelt memory, no mention at all. It was as if the feud had frozen in time. To fans of both, it was heartbreaking. Two giants of country, separated not by distance, but by a fundamental disagreement on what country music was supposed to be. But if Waylon saw Garth as a threat to tradition, the next legend saw him as something worse, a man who didn't show proper respect. And when Garth made one very public omission, it lit a fire the whole country music world could feel. George Jones wasn't just a country legend. He was the legend, a voice that could break your heart and a career that defined an entire era of music. But despite his towering influence, there was one moment that George never forgot, and it involved Garth Brooks. A television special, and what he saw as the ultimate slap in the face. It was 1999, and CBS was preparing a star-studded concert special called George Jones' 50 Years of Hits, a once-in-a-lifetime event to honor the possum and his staggering career. Dozens of country's biggest names were scheduled to appear, performing George's greatest songs. But when the lineup was announced, fans noticed one glaring omission. Garth Brooks was nowhere to be found, and George Jones? He noticed too. Word quickly got out that Garth had refused to perform. His reason? The producers asked him to sing a shortened version of He Stopped Loving Her Today, and Garth allegedly declined, saying the song was too sacred to be edited down. On paper, it sounded noble, but to George, it felt like disrespect. He wasn't just disappointed, he was furious. Jones's wife, Nancy, later confirmed how hurt George was. It broke his heart, she said. He didn't understand why Garth wouldn't do it. In interviews, George made it clear he felt snubbed. And when the special aired without Garth, the absence was louder than any applause. To this day, the feud remains one of the strangest in country music history. Two men who admired each other's talent, yet couldn't bridge the silence between them. Garth eventually apologized, years later, in a quiet moment few noticed. But the sting never fully faded. And if Garth thought that wound had healed, the next name on the list brought back all the bitterness, because this artist represented a version of country music Garth quietly despised. If there was one song that split country music straight down the middle in the early 90s, it was Achy Breaky Heart. Some fans danced along without shame, others winced the second the beat dropped. And right in the middle of that cultural chaos stood Ray Cyrus, a mullet-rockin' newcomer who exploded onto the scene with a song that became both a monster hit and a massive punchline. But if anyone had a problem with what Billy Ray represented, it was Garth Brooks. On the surface, the two had plenty in common. Both broke out in the early 90s, both brought fresh energy to country, and both appealed to a massive mainstream audience. But behind the scenes, their styles and their philosophies couldn't have been more different. While Garth was crafting heartfelt ballads and arena-sized anthems with deep emotional roots, Billy Ray was topping charts with what many called a novelty hit. And that didn't sit well with Garth. He never publicly trashed Billy Ray, but insiders say he made his feelings known loud and clear. Rumors spread through Nashville that Garth felt Billy Ray was cheapening country music, turning it into a circus act built on gimmicks and line dance crazes. Producers and promoters claimed the tension was real. When the two were booked on the same shows, they rarely interacted. One industry insider once said, "You'd never hear Garth say a word about Billy Ray, but you could feel the frost in the room when they passed each other backstage." And if fans were hoping for a collaboration, they waited in vain. Despite being two of the biggest names in country at the time, Garth and Billy Ray never shared a song, a stage, or even a photo app. Garth's silence spoke volumes. Years later, Billy Ray seemed to shrug it all off, reinventing himself through television and family fame. But the divide remained. Garth kept his distance, never commenting on Billy Ray's resurgence or his controversial career turns. To him, Billy Ray may have been a chart topper, but he was never truly part of Garth's vision of country music. Still, as frosty as that relationship was, it was nothing compared to the quiet, simmering tension between Garth and the final name on this list, a man whose swagger, politics, and unapologetic boldness pushed every button Garth had. Toby Keith and Garth Brooks might have stood on the same country stages, but they were worlds apart, and they both knew it. On paper, they were titans, two of the biggest cellared artists of their generation, each commanding legions of loyal fans. But behind the scenes, their relationship was far from harmonious. Where Garth was calculated, reserved, and media-friendly, Toby was brash, unapologetic, and made headlines without even trying. And the biggest wedge between them? Control. Control over music, control over image, and most of all, control over how country music was defined in a post-9/11 world. Toby's patriotic anthem, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, became a cultural lightning rod. While it rallied millions, it also drew sharp criticism, including from artists who felt it was too aggressive, too polarizing, and too political for mainstream country. Garth never publicly condemned the song, but he didn't praise it either. In fact, he remained oddly quiet, even as the rest of Nashville took sides. Whispers started to circulate. Industry insiders claimed Garth thought Toby was reckless and divisive, someone who was using patriotism not as a message, but as a marketing tool. The two were said to have butted heads behind closed doors, especially at award shows and industry functions where tensions were high and egos even higher. Then came the rumors that Toby mocked Garth's repeated retirements and comebacks. While Garth stepped away from music to focus on family, Toby kept grinding, and he wasn't shy about throwing shade. In one interview, he quipped, "Some people retire more than once. I just keep working." Fans took it as a jab. Garth, true to form, didn't respond, but those close to him said the comment stung. Unlike Garth's other feuds, this one never got loud. There were no diss tracks, no call-outs, no tabloid meltdowns, just two powerful men circling each other from a distance, refusing to share a spotlight. They never collaborated, never stood side by side, and always seemed to exist on opposite ends of country's moral compass. But that raises the question, if Garth never named names, how do we know he truly disliked these five men? Well, sometimes the loudest message is silence. And Garth's silence has been deafening. Garth Brooks might have built his legacy on humility and heart, but make no mistake, he's no stranger to calculated silence. While he never went on record to say, "I hated this singer," the clues were everywhere, if you knew where to look. For starters, Garth has always been incredibly careful with his words. He doesn't rant back. He plays the long game, letting others talk while he keeps his image squeaky clean. But behind the scenes, that's where the real stories live. Music journalists, radio insiders, and Nashville veterans have whispered for years about the feuds Garth won't confirm. A tour manager once said, "If Garth doesn't like you, he'll never say it. He'll just make sure your name never comes up again." Others described him as polite in public, strategic in private. And then there were the subtle jabs. When asked in interviews about his peers, Garth was known for complimenting almost everyone. He'd heap praise on Alan Jackson, George Strait, Reba, but when names like Travis Tritt or Toby Keith were mentioned, he'd pivot, he'd smile, he'd drop a vague, canned line like, "Country music is a beautiful family with all kinds of personalities." The translation, not saying anything is saying something. There were also the lyrics. Garth's 2014 comeback song, "People Loving People," was widely interpreted as a response to the political division stirred by songs like Toby Keith's "Angry American." The message was clear: unity, not rage. And while Garth didn't name names, fans read between the lines. Then there's the question of collaborations, or rather, the glaring lack of them. Garth has worked with dozens of artists over the years, but never with the five names we've explored. Not once, no duets, no tribute appearances, not even a shared stage at major country award shows, unless it was unavoidable. Even tribute albums and Hall of Fame ceremonies where country artists bury old grudges and honor the legends saw Garth mysteriously absent when certain names were involved. Coincidence? Maybe, but after a while, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Because when Garth Brooks doesn't want to be associated with someone, he makes it known without ever raising his voice. And perhaps the most powerful proof of his quiet grudges, the things he didn't do, the stages he avoided, the shows he skipped, the names he left off his thank you speeches. Because when you're Garth Brooks, sometimes all it takes is a pause, a missing name, or a carefully worded answer to expose everything. But in the end, maybe the biggest clue to how Garth really felt about these men is that he simply never said their names out loud. And in country music, that kind of silence speaks louder than any song. Garth Brooks may have sung about love, loss, and redemption, but behind the lyrics and beneath that cowboy hat was a man who knew exactly how to navigate the cutthroat world of country music. He didn't need to lash out. He didn't need to throw punches or tweet insults. Instead, he did something far more calculated. He vanished his enemies with silence. And maybe that's the most Garth Brooks thing of all. Because while other artists picked fights with microphones and magazine covers, Garth did it with eye contact withheld, stages avoided, and names never spoken. Travis Tritt, Waylon Jennings, George Jones, Billy Ray Cyrus, Toby Keith, each one left out of the Garth Brooks universe deliberately, carefully, and with just enough ambiguity to keep fans guessing. Was it ego? Was it principle? Or was it simply Garth protecting his brand one quiet snub at a time? Whatever the truth may be, one thing's certain, the Mr. Nice Guy image was never the whole story. Behind the ballads and arena lights was a man who played the game better than anyone else, making friends where it mattered, cutting ties where it didn't, and building a legacy so bulletproof that even his feuds became part of the myth. Because in the end, maybe Garth Brooks didn't have to say who he hated, he just had to never sing with them.